Hi, my name is Francesca Cerri, and I'm doing a presentation on the feasibility of starting a large animal ambulatory veterinary practice in rural Colorado. You may be asking why I'm doing a presentation on this, and this is because over the past decade there's been a huge demand for veterinarians but almost no response. This has led 500 counties in need of veterinarians and shortages in 44 states. So what are the reasons behind this? Three speculated reasons are: first, there's a larger number of women practicing veterinary medicine and they find difficulty between balancing work and personal life. Two, there's a huge debt associated with veterinary school. Third, the livestock industry has frequent downfalls, and when they have those downfalls, it affects the veterinarians as well, because if your operation isn't making enough to even operate or break even, they definitely don't have enough money to be paying a veterinarian. So why am I qualified to create this plan? I initially volunteered for many years at an equine hospital in California and am now currently working with an ambulatory equine veterinary service, which has allowed me to understand the daily costs of running an ambulatory service as well as what's necessary to be on the vehicle. I'm also an animal science major, which has given me an idea of the industry from the client's perspective as well as the harsh realities associated with this industry. So what's the plan? First, we're going to look at postgraduate financial status of veterinary students. Second, we'll look at the finances behind running and operating an ambulatory service as a startup and long-term. Then we'll look at how much it costs to live in rural Colorado. And finally, look at how much the large livestock operations are making and if they would have the money to pay a veterinarian. So, looking at veterinary schools, on this slide I have the in-state and out-of-state tuition costs as well as other expenses that a veterinary student and a postgraduate veterinary student might face that could affect whether or not they would want to do a rural startup. So the expenses of veterinary school, as I mentioned, can be a huge disadvantage to starting a rural startup. Because most students end up with $143,000 to $200,000 in debt. There are incentives and financial aid programs, but how much do they help? So Penn State has a full ride scholarship for rural veterinarians. However, only a few have been admitted to it due to lack of interest. My next slide has operating expenses that I've gathered for an ambulatory service. These are a rough estimate, but I think they give a good idea of what a ambulatory would face as startup costs. Our low side would have been $143,890, but I did not include bandaging materials, syringes, medicines, drugs, etc. because this information is not widely available to the public. But the average startup cost is about $250,000. So due to my data not being completely accurate, I would put us at $250,000 for a startup fee, maybe a little bit more than that. My next slide has the living expenses for Yuma County. These are pretty good estimates and they are on the lower side. However, they can affect how a veterinarian is getting paid and how they can operate, because they need to be able to cover the cost of living. This information was difficult to get access to. Yuma County's detailed profile information provided a lot of this information from my previous chart. However, the numbers weren't exact. They used numbers that compared it to the national average rather than exact dollars and cents. I think a lot of this will be hands-on experience if it comes down to it, trying to compare prices, seeing what county you're actually living in and how much gas is and the different things that would affect the cost of living. So finally, can the client pay me? Usually a call charge is about $50 and the average herd size is about 200 cows in the US. But Penn State Extension says that you should allot $88 to $126 for veterinary expenses per cow, and Drovers.com, which is a huge cattle magazine, says $32 per cow. Then there's the question of how many of these cows are actually getting treated by a vet, and VTH says that usually there's 85,000 food animals per one vet, and that vet covers a square mile of 72 square miles. So the reality of the business is it's tough to tell how much everyone's getting paid for. A lot of the people on the operations can do this work themselves, so it eliminates the need for a veterinarian. This is complex, and a lot of knowledge would come from trying to operate said business. I do believe it would be feasible if you would aim to get scholarship and lower in payments, build up significant clientele, have a demanding schedule, keep living expenses at a minimum, and keep the company spending at a minimum until the company is big enough.